Network Rail presents a vast operational challenge by any reasonable set of metrics. So, as a result, the network has been subdivided into 5 regions, and those with an eye for their railway history will spot more than a passing resemblance to the British rail regions of the past. The Eastern region covers a vast area, including the East Coast Main Line, the Midland Main Line, and the whole of Anglia. And the projects underway include some of the biggest and most critical: the Pennine Route Upgrade, East West Rail, and the East Coast Digital Programme, the first major rollout of the new Electronic Train Control System, ETCS. And in charge of all this, since being appointed 6 months ago, is Ellie Burrows, Regional Managing Director, Eastern. I've come to Bedford on a blustery morning to chat to Ellie about the challenges, the opportunities, and just the sheer scale of her role.
Ellie, thank you very much for coming on Green Signals. It's great to have a chance to chat. Um, I wonder if we could start with you, your career. I mean, you've got this incredible role. How did you get to this point as far as your journey into the rail industry?
Well, thank you for having me. I do have a really incredible role. I feel really privileged to work in the role of Regional Managing Director for Eastern. I actually started 25 years ago. I checked before this discussion to see exactly when I started, and it was roughly 25 years ago, a few weeks ago actually, in Network Rail. But I started before that working for National Rail Inquiries at Intercity House in Plymouth, for those that remember it. And that was one of the things that really sparked my interest in rail, getting me to really understand passengers' views of stuff, and then followed by customer service for Great Western, which was an interesting role. Uh, and certainly let me understand passengers' views on life. But over the years, I've worked in a number of roles. I've had a huge opportunity to work across the network in what was L&W in Network Rail, working in Southern with Metro Services, working in South Eastern as the Train Service Director and Deputy MD, and then a number of roles that have given me a really broad understanding of the industry, and actually have really helped me as I've progressed through to understand how the railway works as a system. And I think that's really key to what's made me successful and enabled me to really drive change in the industry.
I mean, it's great that, isn't it? Having seen both the operational side and the infrastructure side,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to set you up perfectly for GBR when that comes along as well. But I mean, just regional managing director, what does the job entail? Because it sounds huge.
It absolutely is a huge role. Eastern Region operates over 1 billion passenger journeys within a year. There is over 6,000 miles of track and over 16 operators working across our network. So
Right.
a huge amount of interactions. We have 4 routes, and we also have the huge Pennine Route Upgrade project led by Eastern Region under the great stewardship of James Richardson as our managing director, and big projects like the East Coast Digital Upgrade, which will have a massive impact to the way that we signal our railways going forward. So it is very, very broad. From an infrastructure perspective, we're responsible for making sure that the infrastructure is where it needs to be, but we have to operate, maintain and renew that infrastructure and make sure that it's in the best position we're able to.
It's extraordinary. I mean, it's one of those roles. I think I'd get up in the morning going, what do I start with today? But I'm sure you have a fantastic team. Let's just dive then straight into something that is almost like the spine of the Eastern region. That's the East Coast Main Line, one of the busiest lines in the country, possibly even in Europe. Um, you're just about to announce, well, just about to launch, sorry, the new timetable. I know it's been a massive undertaking. December 2025, what can we look forward to?
So this is the biggest timetable that we've seen on the East Coast, I'm told, for 10 years, but I actually think when you look at some of the changes that we're making, it possibly is for even longer than that. It is a huge opportunity for us to increase capacity across the East Coast, and it is the culmination of many years' work and £4 billion worth of investment to get us to the point where we can increase the number of services operating across that route. It is a challenging timetable. It has been a difficult and long process to get to the point where we've got the best balance possible of introduction of new long distance services, introduction of new regional services on things like the Leeds Sheffields, for example, and making sure that where there were conflicting aspirations from a number of operators across the network. We've got the best mix that we've been able to do with the capacity and infrastructure that we've got. It will bring huge benefits, I think, in terms of journey times for a lot of our passengers and capacity, but it has been some trade-offs, and there are some challenges around performance that we've been working fantastically actually as an industry to make sure that we deliver what we've said we're going to do. We have said there's going to be a detriment, but we're working really hard to make sure that that is a detriment that people see, and if we can make that even less, that's fabulous. But that may take us a bit of time to really embed the timetable and make sure that we really understand the opportunities within that to keep on chipping away at that performance impact as well.
So you mentioned that performance issue, so let's just deal with that one actually, because you're absolutely right. Network Rail have been really clear, particularly with the regulator when they were looking at open access applications, that the December 2025 timetable could have will have a performance impact.
We'll have.
Do you think people really understand in sort of signing it off that is going to be the case?
So I do think we have been very, very clear in both with the regulator and with our industry partners about the impact of this timetable change. When you are increasing the number of services, we know that makes performance more challenging. And when you look at the construct of this timetable, we do see services operating with a number of services behind on minimum headways. That in itself creates performance risk, but there are a number of very congested parts of the network that are operating very close to its limits at a number of hours in the day. So I think the reasons that we're stating are very, very clear. People can see very clearly the challenges of operating this timetable. And what I've been really proud to be part of over the last 6 months since joining Eastern Region is actually seeing the industry come together to meet those challenges, to really understand the things that we can do together and how train operators can help each other and how Network Rail can help the train operators to really minimise the impact of that timetable.
Do you think sometimes though that we almost have a culture, we almost like kind of consult too much? I don't know, because as Network Rail, I mean, you know that piece of, your team knows that piece of infrastructure really well. And I sometimes think, well, I know it's easy for people like me to say, actually, no, you can have that, and I'm very sorry, but you can't have that.
I think within the rail industry, nobody knows everything, do they? And I think the opportunities when you go through some of these consultation processes is to make sure that you're really weighing up all of the different trade-offs that you need to make as part of these decisions. There are opportunities as we move towards GBR to have more of that information in one place than it currently exists. But I think as Network Rail, we certainly wouldn't see all of the different passenger elements that we'd be trading off in the way that we want to be able to, and GBR hopefully will be able to. And that consultation with stakeholders, etc., is really, really important as well. So I think any timetable needs a level of consultation. I think the process of doing that going forward with more information in-house might be a lot simpler than it has been in the past.
I get that, and that's very fair. As long as somebody at the end of it can make a decision.
Yeah.
There comes a point when you've kind of got to stop the conversation, haven't you? We've been through an East Coast timetable change before, 2018. It wasn't great. That's probably the most diplomatic way of putting it. And are we confident that this time that industry collaboration you've talked about and the planning is actually going to avoid that repeat of 2018?
I think we've learned a lot of lessons as a industry since 2018 in terms of timetable change and timetable changes of that scale. We all know the kind of recommendations that came out of that, and one of the things that happened as a result of that is the industry set up the PMO office working under the direction currently of Chris Curtis, looking at all the readiness of each of the operators and Network Rail for significant timetable changes. And I think that's a real step change because there's a lot more challenge that happens across the industry in terms of readiness now. But on top of that, the partnership that has taken place across the industry in terms of readiness means that we're challenging each other actually and really planning together and understanding the detail of what needs to be right to make this timetable work. It has been really fabulous to see Paul Rutter, the route director for East Coast, and David Horn, the managing director for LNER, really leading the industry in every single element of what needs to be in place to make this timetable a success. And that's everything from really getting into the detail behind driver numbers, to dwell times on each of our stations, to all of those kind of different components that we know are really essential to make it work. So the industry is very much behind this and very much behind making sure that it works. And I think it's a great example of what we can do when we come together actually.
Is it fair to say though, as far as East Coast is concerned, and I think you just alluded to it a bit, it's kind of right, it's a bit full now, right? There's not a huge amount of white space. We've got lots of congested infrastructure. If we want to grow further from here, presumably we're now in the realms of further capital investment upgrade to enhance the capability.
Well, it is absolutely right to say that we've got 3 areas of the East Coast now that we're considered to be congested infrastructure. That is within certain points of the day and in certain days of the week. So it isn't true to say that there's no opportunity for further growth on the East Coast. I do think that there are big opportunities to do further investment in the future, potentially to look at kind of what else we can do to continue growing that. But there are some opportunities left to go. It's just when and how you do that.
Well, that'll probably be music to freight operators' ears, I know, because that's one of the issues, isn't it? Is how do we get more freight on the East Coast? One of the projects that is underway on the East Coast, which is extraordinary just of itself, is East Coast Digital Programme, and I know that's well advanced now, and it has a potential to be quite dramatic. What is that actually going to deliver, do you think, for the East Coast?
It's been really fantastic to see that we moved to a position of signals being away and a full ETCS operation on the Moorgate lines earlier on this year. And that's been a real milestone for us and a real energiser, I suppose, in terms of what we can achieve and the future of digital for the railways. And there's a really big opportunity for us in terms of our longer term signalling strategy to drive down cost by fundamentally removing signals from the line side and changing the way that we therefore have to operate and maintain the railway around those signals. So there are big opportunities there. I do think that there are things that we are yet to fully understand around performance and capacity as we work through this as well. And as we work on some of the Pathfinder projects that like the East Coast, like TRU, we'll start to see kind of really the business case, I believe, building strongly from kind of where we are at the moment to not just the reduced costs, but the other opportunities that this gives us.
And so that's an interesting point, because I absolutely get the reduced cost bit. If you've taken away a lot of infrastructure and moved it effectively into the cab of the train, get that. The capacity issue I find more interesting, and there seems to be sort of different views on that. Are we confident that ETCS could lead to a significant capacity improvement in due course?
So we know that the way that the network is designed means that sometimes our signals are put in less than optimum positions, don't we? So there has to be some sort of opportunity where we know our drivers can't see around corners, and therefore where we've positioned our signalling could create levels of capacity. Whether that's significant enough or not, we'll see as we kind of work through the detail of the projects and we progress. And where we move away from fixed signalling in ETCS to later projects, which we might see moving block, that surely has a opportunity for us to increase capacity on that from that perspective. So I think in the future, absolutely, but we need to work through the detail of what that means project by project.
I wonder if we could just briefly touch on Pennine Route Upgrade, because you've mentioned that. I mean, that is a colossal undertaking. I mean, after HS2, that's kind of the biggest project on the railway at the moment, certainly in terms of upgrade and enhancement. We're talking right in the middle of the Huddersfield blockade. That's a fairly significant thing. How is the project going generally? And again, any challenges that you're facing that are having to be overcome?
So TRU is a £9 billion project. That is enormous, and they are progressing really well in terms of delivering what they said they're going to do, when they're going to do it, and within the cost that they've specified as well. So I think it's a really great example of what the railway can do in terms of its delivery. We are very much in the delivery stage over the next 18 months of the Pennine Route Upgrade, and as you said, we're in the middle of the Huddersfield blockade as we speak, and that project is going well. It's been really fantastic to see the progress updates coming out of that, and actually the level of effort that went into planning it, and that huge planning and really understanding the impact that the workers are going to have is really critical to its success. So one of the things I think we really need to take out of that programme and learn from is both the partnership that it has with the train operators, the DFT, and the stakeholders along that line of route, and how working really closely together is key to its success, but also that's time taken on planning to make sure that when you get to delivery it's as strong as it can be is also absolutely critical.
You've mentioned quite a few times collaboration and working in partnership with the train companies. Talked about the East Coast timetable. I know that you work very closely with Steve White on South East and almost you had an alliance going before anybody really thought of alliances. Do you think that GBR, Great British Railways, offers something in addition to that, or because the way you're describing this is almost like, well, we're kind of getting on and doing it anyway.
So I do think that we've got a huge opportunity to work together far more than historically that we have done. So I was really privileged to work closely with Steve in South Eastern. You're absolutely right. And I've had the privilege of working really closely with another number of train operators across the network. There are definitely things that we can do just in partnership by being more open with each other, by trusting each other, by sharing information and just understanding each other's levers. And we've had huge success in that. Working with Ellie Burrows when I was in the route director for Anglia, I think we worked really, really well together and delivered real performance improvement by just better understanding each other's organisations and pulling our organisations together with really clear common goals. I do think GBR is going to bring us an opportunity, though, to just look at where some of those incentives still remain a little bit misaligned, and where even now we have performance targets in some operators in Network Rail that aren't the same number, and that can't be right, can it? We should be aiming for the same goals, and we should be looking at some of those things that historically have meant that we're pushing more in other slightly different areas from each other, and getting that all into one place has to have its opportunity. So I'm really excited by that. I don't think we need to wait for it. I do think we've got really strong relationships that we can keep on building on, but the more we remove those misaligned targets and incentives, the more opportunity I think we have.
We're here at Bedford, which is interesting because, of course, that's not on the East Coast Main Line, that's on the Midland Main Line. I'm fascinated by this because Midland Main Line electrification has been one of those projects that it's in, it's out, it's on, it's off. You've switched on the energiser wires up to South Wigston, but we had Sir Peter Soulsby on the show recently, the Mayor of Leicester. He was quite withering, not of Network Rail, but it was quite withering of the government's decision to not fund the next phase, electrification. It does feel a bit odd, sort of having wires that stop just south of possibly one of the most important sort of cities in the region.
So the completion of the last 23 miles from Kettering to Wigston does mean that 60% of the Midland Main Line has been electrified, and that's a huge achievement, and I'm hugely proud, and the teams are hugely proud of the work that's gone into doing that, and the positive steps that they took forward on reducing the cost of electrification and getting it to that point. And that is something that we really need to take account of looking forward for future electrification schemes. I think we've the way that we've stopped work for the time being has meant that we understand what needs to happen next if a decision is taken in the future in terms of progressing with that. So I think it's a real achievement in terms of what's been delivered, and something that we should really consider for the future in terms of how we might tackle these type of projects.
You had done such a great job of getting the unit costs down, and I suppose it's just a shame that we can't now continue at those lower unit costs. But what is going to happen is that is this greater call for discontinuous electrification. The idea that, well, that's okay because we've got hybrid trains and they can come off the wires, they can run into Leicester, and they go on to their diesel units. But is that not a case of moving the risk from infrastructure where it's quite manageable and is multi-user, so once you've wired, everybody can use it, onto rolling stock where it's more complex and is very much single user? Because if you don't have a hybrid train, you can't use the benefit of the wires.
So I think there's a huge opportunity in considering the railway as a whole system and considering that balance of infrastructure and the trains. And I'm not sure historically, or certainly over the last few years, we've been optimising that as much as we can do. Discontinuous electrification gives us an opportunity to not just manage where there are gaps in current electrification, but when things go wrong. And when we have, as we know, challenges with high wind and what the operating under wires in high wind can be a problem for us. But when things go wrong and those wires do occasionally come down, there are opportunities for us to move stranded trains and keep operating in ways that we just can't do now. So if we really want to make sure that we keep our passengers moving as much as we're able to, and if we want to create those kind of seamless journeys, I do think, thinking of the railway as a system and thinking what we can do with both battery and electrified lines, gives us a huge step forward from our current operational methods.
But carrying around diesel engines is still a weight penalty. And I know that that some trains may be able to swap them out and put batteries in, and for no more weight penalty. Just seems a shame, really. I suppose I've always taken the view that for our main corridors, and the Midland Main Line clearly is one of those, putting wires up benefits the maximum number of people rather than what could be quite complex solutions. But presumably, despite the fact you're pausing on Midland Main Line electrification, how do we keep the skills and the knowledge alive so that, should decisions change, because this is politics after all, and it could do, we can reactivate that and still have the benefit of those learnings that you've achieved?
So that's a really good question, and it's really important that we make sure that as an industry we've got the capability when future decisions are made around electrification to be able to meet those challenges. We are absolutely looking at the best way to deploy the skills that we have within Network Rail, for example, and working with our industry partners to understand what opportunities there are for them to work with us going forward as well.
Okay. Because it would be a shame if we lost all that knowledge, wouldn't it? And so hopefully we can retain that. I wonder if we can just talk just briefly about CP7, which is an odd thing to say, really. How can you have a brief conversation about it, right? But we talked about it on Green Signals very recently. We had Liam Rattigan, who is the Director of Business Planning for Finance, talking about the challenges of around supplier spend, and he made the point, 2 billion's been eaten up by inflation before you guys even start, really, and the fact that we're having to move away from some renewals and do more in terms of maintenance and life extension and so on. My concern is that feels something you can probably get away with for the short term, but it's going to build up problems for the future when those assets have to be renewed, potentially for higher cost. How are you managing that on your region to ensure that we don't store ourselves up big costs in the future?
So as an infrastructure organisation, we do have to manage both the short term and the long term in terms of our assets, and we talk about whole life cost a lot as an organisation, really understanding the things and the interventions that we need to do now. And when we talk about kind of maintenance now, some of that stuff's really heavy refurbishments, as we call it. We're going in there and doing very significant work, but not necessarily replacing absolutely everything if it isn't necessary to do it at that point in time. Of course, not if we weren't doing that, you would be storing up big problems for the future. And we are managing an aging asset as well to some extent. So there is a growth of things that we will need to tackle in the future. But my role and my team's role is to make sure that we're really minimising the impact of doing that and really understanding how we, as far as possible, manage that whole life cost of that asset and make sure that we are delivering now, but also making sure that there is a sustainable position for the future as well.
Okay, that's fair. But something that's just literally, I was genuinely just popped into my head. Vegetation, just in the context of managing that short term and not storing up problems for the future. I kind of travel around the railway fairly regularly now and just see the impact of vegetation. Buddleia seems to be one of the biggest issues, and I can't believe it isn't causing problems with brickwork or drainage or stuff like that. Is there more that we can do in tackling vegetation, or is it just kind of we're just going to have to learn to live with it?
So we've been doing a lot in really understanding the best way to deal with vegetation, and it is if you look at the miles of trackside that we have across our network, it is an enormous issue. Just 6,000 miles of track across Eastern alone. You can imagine quite how many trees and quite how much vegetation sits along that line side. So we've improved our understanding of the vegetation around our network over the last few years using technology such as artificial intelligence and cameras, but also using drones to survey different areas and getting a really strong understanding of what is out there and what is a risk to us that's out there across the network as well. We also need to manage the balance with biodiversity and make sure that we're doing the right thing for the environment in the decisions that we're making as well. I have increased spend across Eastern in our vegetation clearance over the last few years, so have a number of the regions across the network. But we are making sure that we're targeting what we're doing it in the right place and at the right times. And you will see improvements in that. But one of the challenges that we are certainly seeing is the variation in seasons and growth patterns is throwing up new challenges for us, and in the way that we need to approach clearance and the way that we manage that around nesting seasons, etc. So it's not just around the amount of money that we spend on doing this, it's about balancing a number of factors, including kind of when we're seeing the growing seasons, what we need to do from a biodiversity perspective. But each of the regions, and the Eastern region being one of those, have very clear kind of plans on what we need to do going forward to manage that. And we'll need to keep adjusting that depending on what we see in changes to weather over the next few years.
I do understand that. Although I suppose probably people like me can say this. There is a sort of a little bit of frustration. We understand about environmental regulations and law, habitat, species, and so on and so forth. But it isn't a linear park, though, is it? It's a railway, right? So at the end of the day, we've got to keep it clear, because if we're not careful, we end up, I suppose it's just finding that balance. It must be quite tricky, but always trying to remember it is actually an operational transport corridor. It is
an operational transport corridor, but actually vegetation can help us. It can help with challenges around trespass, for example, by making some areas quite inhospitable for people to want to get into our network. It can help. When I was in the Anglia route, we introduced a lot of hedgerow and shrubbery along various lines of route where farmers' fields had removed it, and meant that when it snowed, we just had snow blowing across our network and onto the railway. And actually, by reintroducing it in places, it can be really beneficial for us. So it's about getting a balance on some of those things, isn't it?
Just sort of thinking about the outlook, really. I suppose you can't do a job like the one that you have without a positive outlook on life, otherwise it would just sort of get you down. But when you look forward over the next 3, 5, maybe beyond that years, are you positive? And what are the big challenges you think we're going to need to overcome to deliver that positive future?
So as we move towards Great British Railways, we really need to make sure that we continue to focus on our passengers and our freight users, and make sure that we deliver the railway and the service that they're expecting day in, day out, because we haven't got the opportunity to do anything else fundamentally unless we get that right. And that is absolutely at the front of my mind, but also all the train operators that we work really closely with and our freight operators. There are huge opportunities for us to really look at how we make the railway sustainable for the future. And when I talk about that, I'm really talking about how we drive down cost in the things that we do day in, day out, and make sure that we are performing highly and growing the number of users across our network, because that's how we will make sure that this is something that people want to use now and invest in the future. I am absolutely seeing the benefits already of working more closely with our train operators, and I think we have opportunities at the moment to be looking at the ways that we plan our businesses and having really great conversations about not just what our business plans look like for this year, but what our business plans are going to look like over the next 3 years. And I've already started work with my team looking at the next control period. So we just talked about CP8. Of course, as an infrastructure organisation, we're talking way beyond that in terms of what we need to do to CP8 and what we need to do going into CP9. And there are a number of things that we're going to need to work out how to deliver more effectively and more efficiently. And I think there's a huge opportunity there. By planning that much more in alignment with our train operators and really understanding the things that we can do from a whole system perspective to deliver that as effectively as possible, I think that creates us huge opportunities to meet some of those challenges about being a far more affordable railway going forward, and making sure that we continue to deliver for our passengers and our freight users day in, day out.
That's brilliant. Well, look, it's a huge role. I mean, it's mind-boggling, actually. So thanks for taking us through that. Thanks for your time. Who knew Bedford could be so windy? But there you go. But no, that's been tremendous. So Ellie, thank you so much. Good luck with the East Coast timetable. Everyone's watching, no pressure. But no, it is important, and it'll be great to see that come through. But listen, all the very best, and thank you for joining us.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.